The phone buzzed against the nightstand at 3:07 a.m., and I knew it was him before I looked. Nobody else calls at that hour. Nobody else would dare. I hadn't spoken to my father in 11 months. The last time was Thanksgiving, and even that was a negotiated armistice. His girlfriend Karen standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed while he told my 6-year-old daughter that the government puts tracking chips in school milk. Lila had nightmares for a week. I told him if he couldn't keep his paranoia in a box around my children, he could keep it in Montana where it belonged. 11 months of silence, not even a birthday card for Lila, not even a text when Owen turned 4. I let it ring, rolled over. The blue light died against the wall. It rang again. 3:08. My husband Marcus shifted beside me. "Who is it?" "My dad." Marcus didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence was its own sentence. Third ring, 3:09. I picked up because something in my chest moved, not love, exactly, not obligation, something more primitive, the animal part of you that hears a certain frequency and cannot ignore it. "Jess." His voice was low and too controlled. My father is not a quiet man. He's the kind of man who corners you at the dinner table with theories about water fluoridation and sovereign citizen law. But this voice was stripped down, compressed. "Jess, I need you to listen to me and not argue." "Dad, it's 3 a.m. Get the kids dressed. Get in the car. Drive to me." I almost laughed. He lives outside Missoula. I'm in Boise. That's a 7-hour drive on a good day. "What are you talking about?" "Something's happening. I've been watching the feeds all night. There are reports out of Seattle, Portland, Sacramento. They're not on the news yet, but they will be. You need to be on the road before sunrise." "Reports of what?" "People attacking people. Not normal violence. Something else. I can't explain it on the phone. Just bring the kids and come now." I sat up in bed. The house was perfectly still. I could hear the refrigerator humming downstairs, the tick of the baseboard heater in the hallway. My children were asleep in rooms 20 feet from me. Everything was ordinary. "Dad, you've done this before. You called me about the bird flu. You called me about the solar flare. You called Mom about Y2K, and she spent New Year's Eve in a parking garage with canned soup. This is different. You always say that. Jessica." His voice broke on the second syllable. In 33 years, I have heard my father cry exactly once the day my mother's divorce papers arrived. This was that same fracture. "I'm begging you. I have never begged you for anything. Get the kids and drive to me. If I'm wrong, you'll lose one day. If I'm right and you don't come." He stopped. "If I'm right, I will not survive knowing I didn't make you listen." I sat there in the dark with the phone pressed to my ear, and the weight of every false alarm he'd ever pulled sitting in my stomach like Riverstone. My father is a conspiracy theorist. He's been one my whole life. He sees patterns that aren't there, threats that never materialize, and connections between events that only exist in the fever logic of his own mind. But he had never cried. "I'll talk to Marcus," I said. "Don't talk. Move. You can talk in the car." He hung up. Marcus was sitting up when I set the phone down. He'd heard enough. What does he want? He wants us to drive to Montana. Tonight. Now. Because of what? Some kind of attacks. In Seattle and Portland. He thinks it's an outbreak. Marcus turned on the bedside lamp, and the room sharpened into focus. Our bedroom. The laundry basket I'd been meaning to fold. Lila's crayon drawing taped to the mirror, a family of stick figures holding hands under a purple sun. Everything unbearably normal. Jess. Marcus rubbed his face. Your dad thinks the mailman is a government informant. I know. He thinks cell towers cause cancer. I know. Last year he told Owen the moon landing was faked. Owen cried at school because the other kids laughed at him. I know all of this, Marcus. Then why are you sitting up like you're considering it? I couldn't answer that. Not logically. There was no rational defense for what I was feeling, a low-frequency vibration in my chest, something that bypassed thought entirely. My father is a broken clock. But broken clocks are right twice a day. And the sound of his voice breaking open at 3 in the morning was something I could not metabolize into dismissal. Let me just check, I said. I pulled up my phone. Twitter first, nothing on the main feed. I searched Seattle attack. A few scattered posts from the last 2 hours. Someone describing a crowd rushing a hospital. A shaky video too dark to see much of people running down a street. A post from a user in Portland. Something is very wrong downtown. Do not go near the waterfront. Nothing confirmed, nothing official. The kind of ambient noise that could be anything: a protest, a gas leak, a shooting. The kind of thing that either becomes a headline by morning or evaporates into the background static of American violence. There's something, I said. I don't know what. Marcus got out of bed and took my phone. He scrolled for 2 minutes, his face unreadable. Then he handed it back. Even if something's happening in Seattle, that's 400 miles from here. And your dad is in Missoula, which is another 350. You want to drive 7 hours into nothing because your dad saw some tweets? He wasn't reading tweets. He monitors those shortwave channels, the scanner feeds, the conspiracy channels. Marcus. He looked at me, really looked. And I think he saw something in my face that unsettled him more than the phone call, because I am not my father. I am the opposite of my father. I am the one who triple-checks sources, who reads the fine print, who insists on evidence. And I was standing in our bedroom at 3 in the morning, with my shoes already on, because my body had made a decision my brain hadn't caught up to. If we go, Marcus said slowly, and this is nothing which it will be, I want you to understand what it costs. I have the Hernandez deposition Monday. The kids have school. We'd be driving all day, spending the night with your dad in that compound he calls a house, and then driving all day back. And your father will use it as proof that his paranoia is justified. Which means the next time. I know all of that. He was quiet for a long time. The kids stay asleep until we're in the car, he said finally. I'm not waking them up for a drill. I could have kissed him. I didn't. I was already moving, pulling jeans on, grabbing the go bag from the hall closet that Marcus always teased me about. The go bag, he said, was a genetic inheritance from my father. 72 hours of supplies. Water purification tabs, first aid, protein bars, cash, copies of our documents. I'd packed it 2 years ago and never touched it. Now I was carrying it down the stairs at 3:24 a.m., and the only sound was my own breathing and the hum of a house that didn't know it was about to be left behind. I carried Owen first. He's 4, and he sleeps like the dead, a phrase I'll never use casually again. He folded into my shoulder without waking, his breath hot and even against my neck. I buckled him into his car seat in the dark garage, his head lolling sideways, and went back for Lila. Lila is 6, and she is not her brother. She opened her eyes when I touched her shoulder. Mama? We're going on a trip, baby, to Grandpa's. It's dark. I know. You can sleep in the car. She sat up and looked at me with those eyes, my mother's eyes, brown and too perceptive. Is something bad happening? No, sweetheart. Grandpa just misses us. The first lie. I counted them after. Marcus was loading the trunk when I brought Lila down extra water jugs, the camping cooler, 2 sleeping bags. He'd added things without me asking. That frightened me more than the phone call. Marcus doesn't indulge fantasy. If he was loading the car, some part of him was calculating the same odds I was. We pulled out of the driveway at 3:41 a.m., our neighborhood Maple Ridge, a development of identical beige houses with identical fenced yards, was completely dark. Not a single porch light on, not a dog barking, just sodium street lamps casting their orange pools on empty asphalt. I drove. Marcus navigated. Neither of us turned on the radio. Take 95 north to the highway, he said. We'll hit the interstate by 4. We were on the road for 12 minutes before I saw the first thing that didn't belong. A car, a silver minivan, was stopped diagonally across 2 lanes of Franklin Boulevard. Both front doors open, dome lights still on. No one inside, no one visible outside. Just the van, sitting there, like someone had abandoned it mid-thought. I drove around it. Marcus watched it pass through his window without comment. 2 blocks later, a woman was standing on her front lawn in a nightgown, not moving, just standing there facing the street, arms at her sides. I couldn't see her face. Don't stop, Marcus said. I didn't stop. We hit the highway on-ramp at 3:58 a.m. and the road opened up in front of us, dark, empty, the white lines unspooling under the headlights. Boise disappeared in the rearview mirror, and for a few minutes everything felt like nothing. Like a road trip. Like the absurd aftermath of my father's latest episode. Then Marcus turned on the radio. Static on 3 stations. The 4th, the local AM news affiliate, was mid-broadcast, not their normal anchor. A woman's voice, shaky, reading from something. Residents in the downtown Seattle corridor are advised to shelter in place. King County Emergency Management has issued a Level 3 advisory. Do not approach individuals exhibiting aggressive or disoriented behavior. Repeat, do not approach. Marcus and I looked at each other across the center console. In the back seat, both kids slept. Call your dad, Marcus said. Tell him we're coming. The first hour was denial wearing the mask of calm. We drove north through the dark belt of southern Idaho, and the highway was almost empty, just long-haul truckers, and the occasional car moving too fast in the opposite direction. I called my father at 4:15. He answered on the first ring. You're driving? Yes. Good. Which route? 95 north to 12, then across to 93. No, don't take 12. Take 95 all the way up to the Lolo Pass. Stay off the main corridors. That adds 2 hours, Dad. The main corridors are going to be the first ones to lock. If this goes the way I think it goes, they'll close the interstates by noon. Marcus was listening on speaker. He leaned toward the phone. Richard, this is Marcus. Can you tell us specifically what you've seen? My father paused. He's never liked Marcus. Thinks he's soft. Thinks a financial analyst who wears pressed shirts and drives a Volvo isn't equipped for the world as it actually is. But his voice was almost gentle when he answered. There are 24 videos out of Seattle right now that haven't hit mainstream yet. People dozens, maybe hundreds, attacking others with their hands and teeth. Not gang violence, not drugs. The ones doing the attacking aren't responding to pain. Police are firing on them, and they're not going down unless it's a headshot. There are reports coming out of Portland, Sacramento, San Francisco. The pattern is coastal cities first, moving inland. Boise has maybe 6 to 8 hours before it reaches you. Before what reaches us, Marcus pressed. I don't know what to call it. Nobody does yet. But it's real, and it's moving fast, and I need you off the road before full daylight. How fast are you going? 75? Go faster. I pushed it to 85. The Volvo hummed. The kids slept. By 5 a.m., the sky was just beginning to gray at the edges, not sunrise yet, but the promise of it. We'd been driving for an hour and 20 minutes and covered almost 100 miles. The radio stations were cycling between emergency broadcasts and dead air. No national coverage yet, just regional alerts, the kind you hear during wildfires or flash floods. Shelter in place, avoid downtown areas, do not approach. Then Marcus found a station out of Spokane that was broadcasting live. A man's voice, not a professional anchor, someone calling in. They're in the streets. I can see them from my apartment. There's God. There's maybe 30 of them on the corner of Division and Francis. They're not they don't move right. They're fast but wrong, like their joints don't work the same. Someone just drove through them and they got up. They got up. The broadcast cut to static. Mama? Lila's voice from the back seat, small and alert. What are they talking about? I turned the radio off. Nothing, baby. Just news. Go back to sleep. I can't sleep. It's getting light. She was right. The sky was paling, and the landscape was emerging around us. Brown hills, dry grass, the endless open, nothing of Idaho's interior. In 6 hours, I'd be at my father's property. In 6 hours, this would be over, or it would be everything. Can I have a snack? Owen's voice. Awake now, too. The normalcy of the request was almost unbearable. Marcus reached back with a granola bar, and I kept driving. At 5:40 a.m., we stopped for gas at a station outside Grangeville. The sun was cresting the ridgeline and painting everything amber. The station was open, a single attendant inside, a thin man in his 50s watching a phone propped behind the register. You folks heading somewhere? He asked when Marcus went in to pay. North, Marcus said. Smart. I've been watching this all morning. He turned his phone screen toward Marcus. A video-grainy cell phone footage of a hospital parking lot somewhere. People running, others chasing. The ones chasing moved in a way that looked human, but registered as wrong, like a marionette being operated by someone who'd only seen people walk, but never done it themselves. My wife called from Lewiston 20 minutes ago, the attendant said. Said there's military on Highway 12. National Guard. They're setting up checkpoints. Marcus came back to the car with the information and a full tank. Your dad was right about avoiding 12. He's right about a lot of things, I said. That's what makes him dangerous. We pulled back onto 95 heading north. The road was getting busier now, more cars. Most of them headed the same direction we were. Away from the cities, away from the coasts. I recognized the demographics, families mostly. Trucks loaded with supplies, a few RVs, everyone moving with the same tight-jawed urgency. At 6:15 we hit traffic. Not a jam, just a thickening. Cars slowing to 40, then 30. I could see brake lights cascading ahead. Take the next turnoff, Marcus said, pulling up his phone map. There's a county road that parallels 95 for about 20 miles. I took it. The road was gravel, narrow, cutting between hayfields still silver with morning dew. We were alone on it. The silence should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like exposure, the vast openness of the landscape pressing in. Nowhere to hide if we needed to. At 6:30, my phone rang. My father. Where are you? just past Grangeville, County Road, 3, maybe 4 hours out. Listen to me carefully, Jess. There are reports now out of Boise. It started at St. Luke's Hospital. They're saying dozens of infected coming out of the emergency department. It's in your city. If you hadn't left when you did. He stopped. Let the sentence hang. Just keep driving, he said. Don't stop for anyone. Don't stop for anything that isn't gas. I'll have everything ready when you get here. Ready how? I've been ready for 20 years, Jess. You know that. I did know that. It was the thing I'd hated most about him, the way he'd oriented his entire life around a catastrophe that hadn't come. The basement full of freeze-dried food, the water filtration system, the generator, the solar panels, the radio equipment. The property itself, 40 acres of dense timber with a single road in, elevation advantages, a spring-fed creek. He'd bought it after the divorce when I was 14, and I'd spent every other weekend there feeling like a prisoner in his apocalypse fantasy. Now I was driving toward it at 80 miles an hour with my children in the back seat. The irony wasn't lost on me. It sat in my throat like a stone I couldn't swallow. The county road reconnected with 95 around mile marker 340, and we merged back into a stream of vehicles that had doubled since we'd left it. 3 lanes now behaving like 2 people using the shoulder, cutting past slower traffic. No one was honking. That was the part that frightened me. In normal traffic, people honk. This was the silence of people who understood that everyone was running from the same thing. At 7:45 a.m., we passed through a small town I didn't catch the name, and there was a sheriff's cruiser parked across the intersection, lights flashing. An officer was standing beside it waving traffic through, not stopping anyone, just witnessing. His face was gray. Owen needed the bathroom. I told him to hold it. He started crying. Marcus found an empty water bottle and managed the situation while I kept my eyes on the road and tried not to think about how this was the first morning my children had ever woken up into a world that was ending. By 8 a.m., the national news had finally caught up. We found NPR and listened to a voice that was trying very hard to remain professional. The CDC has confirmed cases of an unknown pathogen causing extreme aggression and apparent insensitivity to pain in infected individuals. Transmission appears to occur through bites or direct fluid contact. Cases have been confirmed in 12 metropolitan areas across the western United States. The president is expected to address the nation at 9 a.m. Eastern. Marcus turned it off when he saw Lila's face in the rearview mirror. She was staring at the speaker with her mouth slightly open, her eyes too wide. "Lila," I said, "look at me." She didn't. "Lila." She turned. "We're going to Grandpa's house. It's in the mountains and it's very safe. We're going to stay there for a while until this gets figured out." "Are people sick?" "Yes, some people are sick." "Are we going to get sick?" "No, baby, we're not going to get sick." The second lie. At 8:30, we came over a rise and I could see a line of vehicles stopped ahead, not traffic, but a blockade. 3 military vehicles across the road, soldiers in full gear, a checkpoint. The line of cars waiting stretched back half a mile. "They're screening," Marcus said, "looking for infected." We waited 40 minutes. When we reached the front, a soldier, young, maybe 22, leaned down to my window. His eyes moved across the car. Me, Marcus, the kids in back. "Where you headed?" "Missoula area, my father's property." "You coming from Boise?" "Yes." "Anyone in the vehicle experiencing fever, confusion, unusual aggression?" "No." He looked at me a moment longer. Then he waved us through. As we passed, I looked in the rear-view mirror. 3 cars behind us, soldiers were pulling a man out of a sedan. He was thrashing. His wife was screaming. The soldiers were not gentle. I pressed the gas and didn't look back again. We reached my father's property at 11:48 a.m. 8 hours and 7 minutes since we'd left our driveway in Boise. The last 30 miles were the quietest. In a single-lane road climbing into timber. No other vehicles, no cell signal. Just the Volvo grinding up the switchbacks and the kids finally asleep again in the back, exhausted by the hours of tension they couldn't name but felt in every tightened silence between their parents. The gate was open. He never leaves the gate open. My father was standing at the top of the drive, beside the house, with a rifle slung across his chest and a look on his face. I'd never seen something between vindication and grief. He is 61 years old and built like a man who splits his own wood, which he does. Gray beard, tanned skin, hands that have never been soft. He was wearing the same canvas jacket he's worn for 15 years. When I stepped out of the car, he didn't hug me. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he looked at the children asleep in the back seat, and something in his jaw moved. "You came," he said. "I came. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." He nodded, like that was fair, like he'd earned that. Marcus got out, and they regarded each other, 2 men who have never found a shared language. My father extended his hand. Marcus shook it. "Thank you for getting them here," my father said. "Jess made the call," Marcus said. "I know, but you let her." That word "let" hung in the air. Marcus's face tightened. I stepped between them, not physically, but conversationally. "What's the situation, Dad?" He turned toward the house. "Come inside, I'll show you." The house was exactly as I remembered, and nothing like I remembered. The structure was the same log frame, single-story, wrap-around porch. But the inside had been transformed. The living room was now a communications center. 3 monitors, a ham radio setup, a police scanner cycling through frequencies. Maps on the walls with pins and lines drawn in red marker. Stacks of printed pages, government documents, medical papers, inventory lists. My father had been tracking this for weeks, maybe months. "When did you first see it?" I asked. Anomalous reports started coming in 6 weeks ago. Isolated incidents: a patient in a Seattle ICU who died and then attacked a nurse 12 minutes later. An autopsy subject in Portland that sat up on the table. Each one was contained, covered up, explained away. But the frequency was accelerating. "And you didn't call me 6 weeks ago." He looked at me and his eyes were heavy. "Would you have listened?" No, I wouldn't have. And he knew that, which meant he'd spent 6 weeks watching the pattern build, calculating the exact moment to call where the window was still open and my resistance might crack. He'd been gaming my psychology the way he games everything, survival as a system of human variables. I hated him for it, and I was alive because of it. Karen appeared from the kitchen, his girlfriend of 4 years, a woman I've met exactly 3 times. She's 55, lean, practical. She put coffee in my hands without asking and sandwiches in front of Marcus. "Kids need food when they wake up," she said. Not a question. "Yes, thank you." She nodded and went back to the kitchen. Whatever their relationship was, she moved through this house like someone who'd accepted its terms long ago. The property was more prepared than I'd imagined, and I'd imagined a lot during those teenage weekends of resentment. The root cellar had been expanded and stocked. 6 months of food for 4 people, which now needed to stretch for 6. Water came from the spring, gravity fed through a filtration system, solar panels and 2 generators for power, a greenhouse frame behind the house already producing greens. "I built this for you," my father said as he walked us through the property that afternoon. The kids were napping inside, Karen watching them. Marcus and I followed my father through his domain. "You built this for a fantasy," I said. "I built this because I knew someday you'd need it, and you'd need it suddenly, and you'd need it to be ready." Marcus was quiet. He was touching things: the water valve, the generator housing, the solar inverter, with the careful attention of a man recalibrating his understanding of someone he'd dismissed for years. "Richard," Marcus said, "I owe you an apology." My father shook his head. "No, you don't. I was wrong 99 times out of 100. This was the 100th time. That's not wisdom. That's probability." It was the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard him say. By evening, we'd settled into a tentative rhythm. The kids woke up and explored Owen, enchanted by the chickens, Lila suspicious of everything. She kept asking when we were going home. I kept not answering. My father's radio was receiving intermittent broadcasts. The picture was becoming clearer and worse. The outbreak had moved inland faster than anyone projected. Boise was now in full quarantine military perimeter, no one in or out. We'd missed the closure by 3 hours. 3 hours. The difference between sleeping in our bed and telling my father he was crazy and being alive on this mountain. After the kids were asleep in the guest room in sleeping bags on the floor because there weren't enough beds. Up. My father, Karen, Marcus, and I sat around the kitchen table, and he laid out the situation as he understood it. The infection spreads through fluid contact bites primarily. Onset is between 4 and 36 hours, depending on wound location. The infected are not dead, as far as I can tell from the reports. They're alive, but neurologically compromised: extreme aggression, no apparent higher cognition, reduced pain response. They can be put down with sufficient trauma to the brain or brainstem. "Put down," Marcus said. "Would you prefer a different term?" Marcus didn't answer. "The question," my father continued, "is not whether this will reach us here. It's when and in what numbers. We're remote. We're elevated. The nearest town is 40 miles. But people will flee into the mountains, and some of those people will be infected without knowing it. And some of the people who aren't infected will be desperate enough to take what we have." "So, what's the plan?" I asked. "We close the gate. We disable the road in 2 places. I've already placed charges on the bridge and the switchback. We monitor the radio. We wait." "For how long?" "For as long as it takes." I looked at Marcus. His face was doing something complex, the calculations of a man trained to assess risk, now running numbers he was never supposed to encounter. "And if someone comes asking for help?" he said. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That depends." "On what?" "On what they can contribute, on whether we can afford them, on whether they're a threat. They're people, Richard. So are we, Marcus. So are your children asleep in the next room." The silence after that was the shape of the next 3 weeks. The first week was almost peaceful. A word that feels wrong, but isn't. The children adapted the way children do, which is to say that they transformed catastrophe into routine within days. Owen claimed the chicken coop as his kingdom. Lila helped Karen in the greenhouse with a seriousness that made her look 40. Marcus threw himself into learning the systems: water, power, communications, with the obsessive focus he usually reserved for client portfolios. And occupied the space between my father and my husband, which is the space I've occupied my entire adult life, but which now had walls closing in on all sides. The radio told us everything we didn't want to know. In 7 days, the infection had spread to 40 states. Major cities were evacuation zones. The military was attempting containment corridors, but failing. The numbers were incomprehensible. Millions infected, millions more displaced, infrastructure collapsing under the weight of mass panic and abandoned posts. The power grid failed on day 5. We didn't notice our solar handled the load, but the radio stations began going silent one by one. By day 8, we could receive only 2. A military broadcast looping the same shelter-in-place message every 15 minutes. And a ham operator in northern Idaho who called himself Whitefish and broadcast survivor reports every evening at 7. It was Whitefish who told us the roads were gone. Not destroyed, just impassable. Cars abandoned bumper to bumper, infected wandering between them. Anyone who'd fled too late was either dead or trapped in their vehicles. Anyone who hadn't fled at all was locked inside their homes, running out of food and water, waiting for rescue that wasn't coming. I thought about our house in Boise, the laundry I'd left in the basket, the crayon drawing on the mirror, the neighbor's dog that barked every morning at 6. All of it in a quarantine zone now. Gone in the way things go when you can never return to verify their absence. On day 9, Marcus and I had our first real fight. Not about the situation, about my father. He's making every decision, Marcus said. We were in the guest room, voices low, children asleep between us. When we eat, what we eat, where we go on the property, when we use the radio. It's his property, Marcus. And we're his family, not his subordinates. He's kept us alive. That doesn't mean he gets to run our lives indefinitely. Have you noticed Lila? She asks him for permission now. Not us. Him. I had noticed. It was a small thing, Lila looking to my father, before taking a second portion at dinner, before going outside, before touching anything. She'd learned in 9 days what took me 18 years. In Richard Calloway's domain, Richard Calloway is the authority. I'll talk to him, I said. Don't talk to him. Tell him. There's a difference. But telling my father anything has never been straightforward. He doesn't argue, he explains. Patiently, with data and logic, why his way is the correct way, until resistance feels like irrationality. Until you doubt yourself more than you doubt him. On day 12, someone came. I heard the motion alarm, first a buzzer my father had wired to sensors along the lower road. 2 short pulses, vehicle approaching. My father was up from the table before the second pulse finished, rifle in hand, moving to the front porch. Stay inside, he told us all. I didn't stay inside. I followed him onto the porch and watched the road below. A truck, old Ford, mud-caked, moving slowly, came around the last switchback and stopped where my father had dropped the fallen tree across the road. A man got out. Then a woman. Then, from the truck bed, 2 more, a teenager and someone older, hunched. They stood at the fallen tree and looked up toward the house. The man raised both hands. Empty. "Hello," he called. "We don't mean trouble. We have an injured person, my mother. She's not infected. She fell. Broke her hip. We're just looking for somewhere to stop." My father raised the rifle, not pointing it at them, just making it visible. "You need to keep moving," he called back. "Sir, my mother can't travel. We've been driving for 3 days. We came from Lewiston." Lewiston is a hot zone. "How long since you left?" 4 days. We've been on back roads. None of us are sick, I swear to you." My father didn't lower the rifle. I watched his profile, the set of his jaw, the narrowing of his eyes. He was doing the math. 4 more people, 4 more mouths. An injured elderly woman who couldn't contribute and would consume resources and medical attention, a risk vector from a hot zone. "Dad," I said quietly, "go inside, Jessica. They have a teenager." "I can see that." "She's maybe 15. I said to go inside." "No." He turned to look at me. The sun was behind him, and his face was in shadow, but I could feel the weight of his stare. This was the moment, the one I'd been circling my entire life. The point where his authority met my refusal, and one of us had to give. "If it was us down there," I said. "If we'd been 3 hours later and missed the checkpoint. If we were on that road with Owen and Lila and nowhere to go. Would you want someone to turn us away?" That's sentiment, not strategy. It's both. Below us, the family waited. The old woman in the truck bed hadn't moved. The teenager, a girl with dark hair pulled back, was holding the old woman's hand. Marcus appeared beside me. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, and his presence beside me was its own vote. My father looked at us both for a long time. Then he looked down at the road. "4-day incubation window," he called down. "You'll stay in the barn for 4 days. Separate from us. I'll bring food and water. If nobody shows symptoms in 4 days, we'll talk." The man below sagged with relief. "Thank you. Thank you, sir." My father turned and went inside without looking at me. But as he passed, he said, so quiet I almost missed it, "This is on you." The family's name was Reeves, Dale and Maria. The teenager was their daughter, Cass. The old woman was Dale's mother, Eunice. They'd left Lewiston when the first infected appeared in their neighborhood. Dale had loaded them all into his truck and driven east, then north, following back roads, sleeping in the truck, eating what they'd grabbed from their kitchen in 10 panicked minutes. I learned this through the barn wall on day 1 of their quarantine. I brought them blankets and food. My father watched from the porch, but didn't stop me. And Maria told me their story in fragments, while Eunice moaned softly on the hay bale they'd made into a bed. "She fell getting out of the truck on the 2nd night," Maria said. "It was dark and the ground was uneven. She went down, and we heard it on the crack. We couldn't take her to a hospital. There are no hospitals anymore." Eunice was 78. Her hip was broken, and there was nothing we could do about it except manage pain. My father had a supply of ibuprofen and acetaminophen, but nothing stronger. "She needs a doctor," Maria said. "There are no doctors," I said, and watched the sentence land on her face like a physical blow. Cass, the daughter, didn't speak for the first 2 days. She sat in the corner of the barn with her knees pulled up and her eyes tracking everything. On the 3rd day, when I brought lunch, she looked at me and said, "Your dad doesn't want us here. He's cautious. He wants us to leave. He'll come around. My grandma's dying. She's not going to make it even if we stay." I didn't know what to say to a 15-year-old who could see the truth more clearly than the adults around her were willing to speak. "What do you need?" I asked. "I need her to not be in pain. That's all I need." On day 4, Eunice developed a fever. My father was at the barn door within an hour. "Fever," he said. "Could be infection." "It's her hip," I told him. "Probably inflammation, maybe a secondary infection from the injury. She didn't get bitten." "You don't know that." "She's 78 with a broken hip. She's been lying in a barn for 4 days. She has a fever because she's injured and cold, and her body is shutting down." He looked at me. "If she turns." "She's not going to turn. She's going to die, Dad. Of a broken hip. In a barn. Because we don't have the medicine to help her." Something moved in his face then. Not compassion exactly. My father doesn't do compassion the way other people do. More like recognition, a recalculation. "Bring her inside," he said. "The back room. Keep the door closed." We carried Eunice into the house that afternoon, Dale and Marcus lifting her on a makeshift stretcher while she cried out with every jostle. Karen had made up the back room with clean sheets and a space heater. We laid her down, and she looked up at the ceiling of a strange house and said very clearly, "I'd like to go home now." She died 2 days later, quietly, in her sleep, of nothing more exotic than a body that couldn't heal itself without the medical infrastructure that no longer existed. We buried her on the property, in a clearing behind the greenhouse where the ground was soft enough to dig. Dale dug most of it himself. Cass stood at the edge and didn't cry, and I realized she'd already done her crying in the barn when no one was watching. After Eunice's death, something shifted in the house, not just in the Reeves family, but in all of us. A barrier had been breached. Not the gate, not the perimeter, something more fundamental. My father had allowed strangers into his carefully constructed world, and it had cost something. A grave on his property, resources spent, a room occupied. And the cost had not destroyed us. Dale proved useful. He'd been a contractor in Lewiston, knew construction, could fix things, understood structural integrity. Within a week, he and Marcus had reinforced the chicken coop, extended the greenhouse frame, and begun building a rainwater collection system my father had designed, but never implemented alone. Maria took over food management, inventory, rationing, meal planning. She was systematic in a way that neither Karen nor I had been. And my father watched her work with something approaching respect. Cass helped wherever she was pointed. She didn't talk much, but she worked hard, and she was watching everything with the kind of attention that suggested she was building something in her mind. A map of how things functioned, where the power sat, what could be leveraged. She reminded me of myself at 15, in my father's house, learning the same lessons. 3 weeks after the Reeves arrived, a second group appeared at the tree line. Not a family this time. 3 men, on foot, carrying packs. They didn't call out. They just stood at the edge of the property and watched the house. My father saw them on the trail camera before anyone else. He called Dale and Marcus to the porch, and the 3 of them stood there with rifles, my father's arsenal now distributed, while the men watched from below. "They haven't approached," Marcus said. "They're assessing," my father said, "counting people, looking for weakness. Or they're scared and tired and don't know how to ask for help." "Those aren't mutually exclusive, Marcus." The men stayed at the tree line for 4 hours. Then they left. We never saw them again. But their presence planted something, a new awareness that we were visible, that our existence was known, that the mountain was not as empty as we'd believed. That night, my father called a meeting at the kitchen table. Everyone, even Cass. "We need to discuss security protocols," he said, "now that we're 8 people and this property is apparently not as invisible as I'd hoped." 7, Dale said quietly. "We're 7. My father paused, nodded. 7. My apologies." It was such a small thing, the correction, the acknowledgement of the grave behind the greenhouse. But it was the first time I'd seen my father adjust himself to someone else's grief. We established watches, 4-hour rotations, 2 people at a time. Perimeter walks twice daily. The motion sensors were checked and expanded to cover the western ridge. My father taught Marcus and Dale to use the rifles properly, not just hold them, but maintain them, sight them, understand trajectory and stopping power. I never wanted to own a gun. Marcus told me that night. I know. Now I sleep with one beside the bed. I know. What does that make me? I didn't answer. I didn't know what it made any of us anymore. Week 6. The radio went silent. Not all at once, the military broadcast had faded weeks ago, replaced by a recorded loop that eventually became static. Whitefish, the ham operator, had been our last consistent contact. He broadcast every evening with survivor counts, route conditions, weather, and occasionally heartbreakingly messages between separated families trying to find each other. On Tuesday of week 6, Whitefish didn't broadcast. Wednesday, silence. Thursday, silence. My father sat at the radio for 3 hours Thursday night, scanning frequencies. Nothing. The entire spectrum was dead. We were, as far as we could determine, completely alone. It doesn't mean he's dead, Karen said. It doesn't mean he's alive, my father replied. The silence changed something in me. As long as the radio was talking, there was a world out there damaged, collapsing, but existing. Other people making choices, surviving, fighting. Now there was only us. 7 people on 40 acres, with a dead woman buried behind the greenhouse and winter approaching, and no way to know if we were the last ones or one of millions scattered across the mountains, doing exactly what we were doing. The kids felt it too. Owen stopped asking when we were going home. Lila stopped asking anything at all. She just watched, worked, helped Karen with meals and the greenhouse. She'd lost weight. They both had. We all had. The rations were careful but not generous. And growing children burn calories that adults can defer. One morning I found Marcus sitting on the porch before dawn, rifle across his knees, staring at the tree line. He didn't turn when I came out. I was thinking about the Hernandez deposition, he said. What? The case I was supposed to prepare for. The Monday after we left. I wonder if Hernandez is alive. I wonder if his lawyers are alive. I wonder if the courthouse is still standing. I sat beside him. It seems insane, he continued, that 6 weeks ago the thing I was most worried about was a deposition, that my biggest stress was billable hours and whether we'd make partner by 40. Is this the part where you say my dad was right all along? He looked at me. No. This is the part where I say your dad was right about one thing, in one specific way, at one specific time. And that doesn't undo the years of damage his paranoia did to you and your family. It doesn't make him wise. It makes him lucky. That's what he said. I know. It's the one thing we agree on. I leaned against his shoulder. The sun was rising, and the sky was enormous and empty, and there were no planes in it. There hadn't been planes in weeks. We can't stay here forever, I said. I know. Not because it's not safe. Because the kids, they need more than survival. They need other children. They need something that looks like a future, not just an indefinite present. Marcus was quiet for a while. Then he said, Your dad won't leave. I know. And we can't leave without being able to go somewhere. I know that too. The conversation ended there. But it didn't close. It sat between us like an open ledger, waiting for an entry that would balance it. On day 51, the infected reached us. I'd almost begun to believe they wouldn't. 40 miles from the nearest town, elevation, single road access with 2 choke points destroyed. My father had calculated the odds and found them favorable, but odds are not certainties, and the mountain is not an island. Dale saw them first. He was on morning perimeter walk the western ridge route and came back to the house at a run. 3 of them, he said, breathing hard. coming up through the creek bed, maybe a mile out. My father was calm. Direction? Southwest, following the water. They follow waterways. It's been documented the sound attracts them. Richard, they're coming here. The creek runs through our property. My father nodded slowly. Everyone inside, Dale, Marcus, with me. Jess the kids. I gathered Owen and Lila into the back room. The room where Eunice had died. Cass was already there. Maria had put her there without being asked. The four of us sat on the bed, and I held my children and listened to the house go quiet. We waited 20 minutes. Then a sound, not a shot, not a scream. A sound I can't describe accurately because nothing in my previous life had prepared me for it. A moan, but not human in the way moans are human. Lower, more sustained, like a frequency rather than a voice. Then a shot, then two more, then nothing. Marcus came in 10 minutes later. His face was white, but his hands were steady. "It's done," he said. "Are you?" "I'm fine. They were people. They were wearing clothes. Regular clothes. One of them had a backpack still on." His voice wavered. "They didn't look like monsters. They looked like hikers who'd gotten sick." He sat on the edge of the bed and Owen crawled into his lap and said, "Daddy, what was that noise?" "Just some animals, buddy. Daddy scared them away." The third lie. We were keeping count together now, Marcus and I. Every lie told to our children to preserve something, their peace, their sleep, their fundamental belief that their parents could keep them safe. That night, after the children were asleep, my father called another meeting. The infected had come from the southwest, following the creek bed, a route my father hadn't accounted for, because the terrain was steep, and he'd assumed the infected wouldn't navigate it. "I assumed wrong," he said. "They're not intelligent, but they're persistent. They'll follow paths of least resistance waterways, game trails, anywhere the vegetation is thinner." "So, what do we do?" Maria asked. "We need to redirect the creek, or block it, or establish a watch point at the southern boundary." "We don't have enough people for another watch rotation," Dale said. "We're already stretched thin." "Then we need more people," Marcus said. Everyone looked at him. "I'm serious. 7 people cannot maintain a 40-acre perimeter indefinitely. We don't sleep enough. We don't have enough hands for defense and maintenance and food production and childcare. We need a community." My father was very still. "You're suggesting we invite people in?" "I'm suggesting we stop pretending isolation is sustainable. It's not. It was never going to be long-term. We need people with skills, medical, agricultural, construction. We need numbers." "Numbers are a vulnerability, Marcus. Every person is a mouth and a risk. And every person is a pair of hands and a set of eyes. We were almost too late today because Dale happened to be on the right ridge at the right time. What if he hadn't been?" The table was silent. I watched my father's face, watched him process the argument, not as sentiment, but as strategy. And I watched him arrive at a conclusion he didn't want. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it carefully. We vet, we quarantine, and I retain final say on who stays." "No," I said. Everyone looked at me now. "You don't get final say. We vote. All adults. Majority rules." "Jessica, Dad, you built this place. You saved our lives. But you don't get to be king because you were prepared. That's not how people live together. That's how people live under someone." The silence lasted a very long time. My father looked at me across the table, and I saw something I'd never seen before. In his expression, not anger, not dismissal, not the patient condescension of a man explaining why he knows better. Something else. Something that, if I'm being generous, looked like pride. Majority rules, he said. Fine. The Reeves stayed. We opened the road partially, carefully, and within 2 weeks, 3 more groups found us. A couple from Kamaya with medical training, a family of 4 from a farm that had been overrun, a man alone, 60s, former military, who said almost nothing but watched everything with an alertness that made my father trust him immediately. 16 people, then 20, then 23. My father hated it and accepted it in equal measure. He taught, he organized, he planned. But he no longer dictated. The votes happened at the kitchen table, which was now too small. So the votes happened on the porch in the evening, with people standing in a circle and raising hands. Not everyone agreed on everything. Some wanted to send scouts south to make contact with other survivors. Some wanted to stay sealed. Some wanted to build permanent structures. Some wanted to stay mobile. The disagreements were constant and exhausting and alive, in a way that my father's unilateral command had never been. Marcus thrived. I'd never seen him this way, physical, decisive, collaborative. He organized work teams. He mediated disputes. He held Owen on his hip during community meetings and let Lila count the raised hands. You're different, I told him one night. Better or worse? I don't know yet. Different. You are too, he said. You're not standing between your dad and me anymore. You're standing on your own. He was right. Somewhere in the weeks of crisis and negotiation and labor, I'd stopped being the bridge between 2 men and started being a load-bearing wall in my own right, not mediator, architect. Lila made a friend, a girl named Sophie from the farm family. I watched them run between the buildings one afternoon, laughing about something. And the sound was so foreign that I stopped what I was doing and just stood there, listening, trying to remember the last time I'd heard my daughter laugh. Owen still had nightmares. He'd wake up crying, unable to name what he'd dreamed. And I'd hold him and lie to him gently until he went back to sleep. But in the mornings, he was himself muddy, loud, obsessed with the chickens. Alive in the uncomplicated way of a 4-year-old who trusts his world because his parents have bled to keep it intact. My father and I didn't have a reconciliation. There was no single conversation that healed the years of damage, his paranoia, my resentment, the childhood spent inside his fear. But something shifted. We worked side by side in the greenhouse one afternoon, planting winter kale, and he said, "I know what I cost you." I kept planning, didn't look up. Growing up in my head the way you did, being a child inside someone else's terror. I know what that cost you. Do you? You built a life as far from me as you could, married a man who was my opposite in every way, kept your children from me because you were afraid I'd do to them what I did to you. Yes? And then the one time I was right, the one time out of 1,000, it brought you back here, back into my house, back under my rules. And I know how that felt, how it still feels. I stopped planting, looked at him. His hands were in the soil, and he was looking at me with something naked and terrible in his face. I don't know how to be sorry for keeping you alive, he said, but I'm sorry for everything else. I didn't say I forgave him. I wasn't sure I did. But I said, I'm here, Dad. I chose to be here. And that was enough. Not resolution, not redemption, just presence. The willingness to occupy the same ground and build something, even on a foundation that was cracked. Winter came and we survived it. Not comfortably, not easily, but together, 23 people on a mountain in Montana, eating stored food and greenhouse greens and the occasional deer from the lower valley. My children are alive. They're different than they would have been, harder in some ways, more capable, less innocent. Owen is 5 now, and he can identify edible plants. Lila is 7, and she knows how to use the radio. These are not things I wanted for them. But want is a currency that stopped circulating the morning I answered my father's call. Some nights, I stand on the porch and look south, toward the valleys we can't see and the cities we can't reach. And I think about what's down there. Who's down there? Whether the world is rebuilding itself, or whether this mountain is all that's left. I don't know the answer. None of us do. But my father is teaching Owen to read by firelight, and Marcus is drawing plans for a schoolroom. And Lila laughed today. Really laughed. The unguarded kind, and I'm learning to live inside a choice I made at 3 in the morning because a man I'd stopped trusting was crying on the phone. I didn't forgive him. I didn't have to. I just had to need him, and let that need be something other than defeat.